Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan, and we are going to talk about fatigue today. We've all experienced a sense of exhaustion. So we did just have an episode about burnout. So Donovan, I wanted to ask you, what do you feel like the difference is between fatigue and burnout?
So the difference to me, and probably what we'll focus a lot on, is burnout in my mind is kind of something that is a result of work generally, or just having to continually do something that you're not really passionate about, or at least doing it in a way that's unsustainable.
Mhm.
The difference in fatigue for me is that it's a lot more of a physical thing, right? Like the way my life is set up can be really nice, and I can be doing all the things I enjoy and still kind of interact with the world in a way that fatigue builds up, and then I have to deal with it. Or on the flip side, like fatigue can be chronic, but can also be really short term. Whereas
Mhm.
burnout, I feel like it doesn't really just show up over the course of one day or 2 days.
Right.
It's something that you kind of build. Whereas fatigue, like you miss one night of sleep or some other, like a night of heavy drinking or something, and then the next
Mhm.
day, like you're going to be very fatigued. So those are some of the first differences that come to mind for me.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes sense because I haven't been getting as much sleep these last few nights, so I'm feeling a sense of exhaustion, but I more or less support my well-being so I don't feel burnt out. And I think that's a really good distinction that you made. For me, I think fatigue, I usually what my first thought is something about potentially like looking for health conditions that could be contributing to fatigue, like, anxiety, depression, definitely mood disorders can contribute, but also like thyroid issues. Maybe you have a vitamin D deficiency. Maybe you have an autoimmune condition or digestive issues. There's so many like factors that go into fatigue. So, when I see a client who was coming in for fatigue and they just want like a supplement, and I'm like, well, I need to find out what's wrong with you. And there's like a lot of possibilities of what. And so it's kind of like navigating through this puzzle in a way, because it's not just like, oh, just take vitamin D, but maybe that's not the problem. Maybe there's something else going on that we have to explore medically or in your own life, whether that's, maybe you're not sleeping well enough. Maybe you are like just switch jobs and you're really stressed out. So that's that looking at your life factors also matter too.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point, is that fatigue is often a symptom, but doesn't really point to the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess there are times where it's pretty simple. Like like I was saying, like if you have a heavy night of drinking, like you kind of
Yeah.
know what caused that.
Mm-hmm.
But especially if you're running into like chronic fatigue or fatigue has question mark roots,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that's like a great point to kind of look at a number of factors. And there's often not, and I don't know, you can go into this more, but it seems to me there's often not a super easy, simple fix, right? It's not like you were saying, hey, you just need this vitamin, right? You have to kind of explore all the different routes and figure out which one is potentially missing something, which
Mm-hmm.
I would guess can take some time.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely when it's a chronic issue where it's frequently occurring all the time. For me, I have pretty good energy most of the time, so it's not a concern. So like today, because I know the reason why I'm tired today is because I haven't been sleeping. And I know I generally function better when I get like 7 to 8 hours a night. When it's less than 7 hours, then I start to feel this drag and I have to like think about what do I need to do about my life to make sure I need to like try to get to bed earlier and structure that as a routine. But when it is a chronic issue, and I see this a lot with people that I work with, it tends to be more of that puzzle, and so that's really where we got to look at all those different factors.
Yeah, so I wanted to hone in on one of the pieces you said,
Mm-hmm.
which is that like you can start to feel it dragging on you or making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious, when you have those kinds of days, um, what do you try to do, or where do you try to make room in your schedule, or how do you try to kind of unwind some of that?
Hmm. If it's possible, if it's really impacting my ability to be present, I honestly was thinking of like canceling a meeting just to be able to take a nap on it. I'm not, but that thought crossed my brain a few times of just like, fatigue is a sign that there's something going on with your body that you need to address. And so it's just fatigue isn't just like randomly happens. It's like, oh, you didn't get enough sleep, so you need some sleep. so yes, I might have to restructure my day, or I have to maybe like move things aside so I can feel energized, because I know when I'm fatigued, I feel like my brain is just so like blah. It's not like firing on all cylinders like it normally is, or I'm like go 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 go, and it's just a time, just like it's just an indicator that I need to rest and recover. And I've learned a lot to not push my body too hard after pushing it too hard for too many times in the past, where I've stretched the limit, where I know I'm like, no, if I feel tired, then sleep, because I will not like an example in med school, if I'm studying for exams and I'm like, I used to do this where I would go study until like 2 or 3 in the morning, and the study time between like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. was really not that optimal, and I don't think I absorbed that much material in my head, and probably made my brain function worse because I'm tired. And so I'm bringing that, and so I learned after not doing so well in my first couple quarters that cramming into late in the night is not really great for my brain function. So it's much more effective for me to get that sleep than to study a couple more hours, is what I've discovered. So because of that, I prioritize sleep among a lot of things these days.
Yeah, and I don't want to say, it's true for everyone, but I do think
Yeah.
that's generally true.
Mm-hmm.
That getting sleep drastically improves performance on just about everything.
Yeah.
I kind of had a similar journey or process
Mm-hmm.
where I would, push and push and push to try to get some stuff done. And to be fair, most of the time I was also wasting a bunch of time. So it would be like waste a bunch of time and then
Right.
stay up extra late to get all your stuff done that you should have
Yeah.
done throughout the rest of the day.
Then there, yep.
And, I had sort of the same experience where I would look back at the things that I had produced when I was feeling fatigued, and they just weren't as high quality. Sometimes, depending on how drained I was, it would be such bad quality that it was actually more work to try to fix the stuff that I had done in the time that I was so tired. So I learned, over the last few years or whatever, to kind of gauge the level of fatigue, right? So like for me, if it's just a little bit, I'm feeling a little tired, I'll try to probably just get to bed a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And that one has always been true,
Mm-hmm.
but it took me a few years to learn that if it's heavier than that, so if it's like at this medium or like intense level of fatigue, that my performance in just about everything is going to drop. And I will try to find anything that I can in my schedule or calendar to just bump out and make that sleep up, because I know for me, it's just so debilitating that it's not worth it. Again, like it took me a while of like reviewing my work between different times and years of maybe of like on and off staying up to try to get things done, to recognize that is really not worth the trade-off. And one of the things I also learned was that something that may take me 4 or 5 hours when I'm fatigued might only take me 1 or 2 when I'm not. So as far as just efficiently using time, there's a lot of situations where it makes more sense to just rearrange the calendar. So nowadays, the only time that I don't do that is if it's something that can't easily be moved or can't be moved, or some sort of opportunity that is really important. And then I try to really pay attention to how often that stuff occurs. A few years ago, before I was paying attention to this, I'd be fatigued like 3, 4, 5 times a week. Now, maybe once a week, like if I don't sleep well or something else comes up. But for the most part, I've cleaned up a lot of my sleep hygiene, a lot of my other just general habits to try to build out that energy. And you mentioned before how you generally have like a pretty good balance of energy, a pretty good level of energy. I don't. Like if I mess up a little bit, I really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So it has pushed me over the last few years to really get nice and tidy about a lot of these routines. Not perfect. It might sound like I am nowadays, but I'm not. Just relative to who I was in the past,
Mm-hmm.
it's much better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's not that I was naturally like an energetic person, kind of similar to you. It took a lot of like trial and error to get to a point where I feel like consistently pretty good energy, because I've identified that supporting my well-being is a major priority, that I need to do that to be able to function and do all the other things that I want to accomplish in my life. And that was a lot of trial and error, and realizing it goes beyond sleep. It's like, eating healthy, exercising. I do work out pretty consistently, and it's just like, these are things that everyone knows that they need to be doing, but it tends to be like it falls off the wagon. So I've worked hard to implement structures if I wasn't being consistent with a certain habit, like exercise. And think of other ways of where I could be consistent. I have to like look at another option, another perspective. For me, I know people who can just go to the gym and they don't need anything else and they just do it. When that I could not do that. Like go to the gym like once every week or two, kind of like here and there. I'd be like begrudgingly like, so for me, when I created a new structure of doing more like group exercises, like small CrossFit workouts, that was like really motivating for me, because I have community, I have a coach, and that got me to work. And if I'm not there, because it's like a small class of like 3 to 5 people, like people notice. So that gets me to go consistently. So it's not really a struggle for me anymore. And that's made a big difference. It's just kind of like thinking of, I have to just constantly reinvent the wheel of thinking, okay, this structure is not working. What do I need to do to create a new structure that would work? And it's just like over the accumulation of experience, trial and error of years of doing that has led to that, to where I am normally. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that ties back into a couple topics we've touched on before, but it's so much easier when you're able to find what specific thing works for you and also set up your environment in a way that works for you instead of against you, right? So for me personally, I don't like take classes for exercise, but I know a ton of people who it helps. So if the social component is something that works for you, or maybe it's the fact that you have to pay for it, or maybe it's the combination of the two, or the fact that people will, like you said, notice if you're not there, be like, hey, where were you last week? Like, what are you doing? Or whatever else. I think that's a really important thing to hammer on, even though we've talked about it before, is just setting things up so that the behaviors you want to do are the easiest and most default. And it might take some work to kind of rearrange your life in that way. But, other things that go along with that, like if you're having a problem getting to bed on time, setting up your devices to just all turn off at 10 p.m. or your internet to go out at 10 p.m. And it might sound on the face of it a little like silly, right? I'm just like, oh man, like, come on, I can do better than that. Like I can just go to bed on time.
Right.
But it's easier when your environment just pushes you to make these choices.
Right.
So that's one thing I wanted to touch on. The other thing is, again, a topic we've talked on before, but and maybe we can dig into this a little bit more. But I feel like fatigue is something that some people look at as, oh, this is something that happens that I have to push through and just kind of deal with and have in my life and work around. And I think fundamentally a more useful mindset is to think about it as a mismanagement of time if you have fatigue, because realistically, like, it's going to inhibit your performance in some way, or build up or lead to burnout, like we were talking about before. Like, something will happen if you don't address fatigue. So I don't think it's something to just accept as far as like, oh, I'm just going to deal with this and that happens all the time.
Right.
It's really something to look at, and look at how you're using your time and make space to get the rest you need, or exercise, or whatever, the nutrition, whatever is missing from that piece of the puzzle, because otherwise you're just not performing optimally. And the reason I bring it up is because that's how I looked at it when I was younger, is kind of like, okay, so I'm tired a bunch of the time, but that's just kind of how things are. Like I'm not sure what else to do, because I want to stay up sometimes, and sometimes I want to do this other stuff. And just as I've aged out of that or compared it to the alternatives, like it's just not worth those trade-offs. And I'd be curious what you think about that, because I do think a lot of people think I will just deal with some level of fatigue all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it's natural and normal for everyone to experience fatigue here and there, I think. But if you're thinking, this is just who I am, I'm just a tired, fatigued person. And it's just like, no, there's so many opportunities to look at, maybe it's your healthy habits. Maybe it's working with a doctor to explore the root cause, maybe underlying medical conditions. There's so many things and opportunities to explore. It doesn't have to be your way of being. And it's like, yeah, maybe you are getting enough sleep. Maybe you're doing everything right and you're still exhausted. And that's where you're like, no, there's something going on. Again, it's like a sign your body is telling you there's something going on and we need to explore it. So like working, especially with like a naturopathic doctor, because we're all about addressing the root cause, of like looking at the million possibilities that it could be, doing some blood work or labs and testing to like really uncover what could that component be that's missing, instead of just kind of being resigned about, well, this is how I am. And it's also kind of like a mentality thing too. I mean, yeah, there's definitely medical conditions that could be related that we want to explore, but it's also like your mentality. There's one thing, and I don't remember if I mentioned this, but the book Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, he talks about, and this is like I used to never, like, one thing he gives an example about how, not everyone defines themselves as like a morning person. And that's how I define myself. I was like, I'm a night person. I hate mornings, kind of like, I wake up, I'm groggy, I'm tired, I'm like, and he used like running as an example of like, well, maybe not everyone's naturally a runner. But if you wake up every day, consistently run every day, and then maybe you do that, as long as even though you might hate it, but you take the action, like one day, maybe a few months, maybe it's a year, I don't know. One day you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm a runner. So it's like taking those consistent actions. And like, if you're like, oh, well, I'm just a tired person, same thing, you're not taking the actions consistent with what an energized person would take, then that's an opportunity to look. And I know the various activities and what can like ramp, like for today, I can't go take a nap because I got some important things I got to do today and I got to present in front of people. So it's just like, no, I cannot just like go take a nap right now. So I know like what amps me up is actually having an engaging conversation with people, if that helps ramp me up, or, exercising. Maybe I got to do some jumping jacks to raise up my energy. Maybe I have to like scream really loud. Just like, I don't know. I just gotta like, I know I gotta do like some actions instead of being like, oh, this couch looks so comfortable. I'll just there. Or maybe it's like watching a video that I know that will kind of amp me up. My partner wanted to watch the new season of Better Call Saul before bed. And I was like, no, because they always ended on a cliffhanger. And that will just keep us up and make us want to watch more. So no, I said no. Yeah, so you have to like factor in. Actually, just as I'm talking about this, and I guess I get ramped up from just talking, getting engaged. Because if you saw me at the beginning of this episode, and Donovan, we chatted before, I was like so tired. But I think talking, maybe that's one of my things. It's not for everyone, but I know like some of the things that work for me at ramping up my energy, and I guess talking, presenting, and being with people does flip the switch. So it can be like a mental state too.
Yeah, there's two things I want to touch on from that. One is I think I might have pushed a little bit too hard in talking about like, if you have fatigue, you don't necessarily have to deal with it, or you should look at it. But there are definitely some circumstances where it is part of the process, and like you're saying, it's natural and it happens. For me, for example, I started on a medication that I wasn't used to, and it made me very tired for a lot of the time, for a while.
Mhm.
So, sometimes there are just like parts of life or cycles of life where you're going to have more fatigue and you do have to deal with it to some degree.
Yeah.
Mostly I meant, don't just give up, like you were saying, like
Yeah.
explore all the avenues that are available to you, because especially if you're doing things like identifying with it, like you were talking about, where like I'm just a night person, so I'm just going to be tired all the time because my job makes me get up early.
Mhm.
Like that pathway is one that's not particularly productive, and that's kind of what I was trying to push back against, because I personally was in that camp before of like, oh, I'm a night person, so when I have to get up super early for school or for work or whatever, like that's not my fault. That's the world's fault imposing itself on me.
Yeah.
Back when I was a different person.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing that I wanted to bring up, what was it? I'm gonna let you go for a second because I need to remember what it was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want to emphasize that point you made was really important and relevant, is just kind of taking ownership and responsibility of the thing because I think that makes a big difference in your perception of like, oh, I remember in med school I had like 8 a.m. Biochemistry class like 4 days a week. And I was just so resentful of that. It's like, why do they have to make it at 8 a.m.? Because that means I have to get up at 7, and I don't want to get up at 7 because I'm not a morning person. My brain's not functioning yet. And I think if I actually took the time to like shift my perception of the thing and take ownership of like, oh, well, I am kind of like procrastinating. I am on Facebook. I am like going to bed late. That's why I'm tired. And I shouldn't be resentful because that's just the situation and I can't do anything about it. Doesn't change anything. It just doesn't, it's not productive for me to like hum and haw about it. Honestly, it's like if I want it to work for me, then I've got to figure out how I need to adjust.
Yeah, it's a really easy cop out, and I
Yeah.
feel like if you aren't paying attention, or at least for me, for whatever reason, that was the default, is to just say
Mhm.
like, well, this isn't fair because this is who I am, and why isn't the world catering to me? And
Right.
I just feel like it's a very uh, weak position to come from. Like, it's just not going to serve you, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to do anything for you, like you said.
Mhm.
I remember the other thing that I was going to talk about,
Oh, yeah.
which is when you highlighted ways to ramp up your energy.
Mhm.
Um, there are going to be times when you have to deal with some level of fatigue. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really great strategy to help get through those things. If
Mhm.
there's something that you can do to bolster your energy in the interim between where you are now and when you can actually get some more rest or
Mhm.
release some endorphins from exercise or whatever else.
Mhm.
Um, there are a lot of relatively small, quick things that you can do to boost your energy. Talking to people, you said, is one for you. It's going to differ per person. I like to listen to music,
Mhm. Oh,
like
yeah.
really fast-paced music, high volume.
Mhm.
If I need a little energy boost, I also get some energy out of talking to people if it's
Mhm.
not for too long and drains me out.
Well,
But
it does have to, it depends on the person.
yeah, yeah,
I'm like, if it's like someone that's monologuing at me, I'm like, but if it's like a more interactive, that can make a difference. Or listening to like an inspirational speaker like Tony Robbins, like that's always energizing or something for me. Yeah.
yeah. So those are good ones. Like you said, like jumping jacks, or like I mentioned it a bunch of times. Would play soccer forever if I just kick a soccer ball around for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That usually gets my energy up. One that I don't really want to mention, but it is an option and not one that people should go for all the time, is caffeine. Like sometimes that can get
Mhm.
you through, but you have to really pay attention because even after like 10 a.m. in the day, it can start screwing with your sleep.
Mhm.
I'm sure you know that all too well. So you really need to pay attention to how that affects you as an individual.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have any other ones? Or the ones that I could think of off
I
the top
do
of my
want
head?
to comment about the caffeine thing as a
Yeah.
doctor because like as a doctor, it's like important. Yeah, it's okay to use it once in a while, but if you're so dependent on caffeine to function, that's really where you really need to look at what you need to readjust about your life. Because if it's like, because it gradually like increases, like, oh yeah, 1 or 2 cups of coffee, and then all of a sudden you need 3 or 4 cups. I've had patients that come and tell me like I drank 4 to 6 cups a coffee every day. And I was like, that's a little much. And it's like, you're wondering why you have sleep problems. Like, consider maybe the caffeine might be contributing to that. But it's like some people, like I have people, so I do a lot of food sensitivity testing. So one of the things I have them take out usually is caffeine. And that's, for a lot of people, it's like the hardest thing for them to give up. It's like, oh no, you can't take my coffee away. It's like, no, everything else, okay, but no coffee. And I'm just like, they are so attached to it. And it's just like, I'm not saying stop drinking it altogether, but wouldn't it be nice for you to, you're going to go through withdrawal for sure. You're going to go through withdrawal if you're that dependent, but don't you want to know what it feels like to not be dependent about caffeine or coffee, whether it's like a Rockstar energy drink or soda or coffee? It's just important to, there's so many other ways. It's just like, it's a crutch really for energy. It's not a solution for energy. So I just want to have people be mindful of that, of not relying on. I actually honestly switched to decaf myself. I know I've lived in Seattle for 11 years. Coffee snobs are like, how dare you drink decaf? But no, but I know for myself, because I have eliminated coffee multiple times. And I just decided I like the comfort. Coffee is like comfort and soothing. So I do like coffee, but I'm okay with, I like the taste. I don't drink it for the caffeine, because for me, I feel like it stopped giving me energy. And maybe it's like a placebo effect for some people, of like, they need that coffee for the energy. But it does give energy. There's like definitely research and science about giving you energy. But for me, I noticed that it didn't give me energy anymore, and it messed up my sleep. So it didn't seem to be worthwhile. And it also, there are some health benefits to coffee, but not if you like throw in a bunch of cream and sugar. But outside of that, there are things to like consider, like repercussions of like too much caffeine. Like once in a while, you might be okay, but it's a slippery slope. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I wanted to make that clear as well, because I think there are a lot of people who are in this cycle of wake up, have your caffeinated beverage. We'll just say coffee to keep it simple. You have coffee in the morning, then you start dragging it 2 or 3. Then you have another cup of coffee, which sets you up to stay up all night, which means you don't get like enough sleep, which means you wake up tired again. And then you just have this cycle, and you can replace coffee with some sort of soda or energy drinks or whatever. But it's just this constant cycle of like, I just have to get enough caffeine to get through to the next thing. And that relationship is one that is not very healthy, right? And it will build up fatigue in a way that can lead to, heavier stuff, or just days that if you don't have caffeine, that's the other thing, is it builds up this reliance on that relationship in a way that if you can't get it, I don't know how often you've been around people who usually drink caffeine all the time, but then don't have it.
Oh, yeah, fan.
Not fun to be around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I lived in Seattle. I know. People are crazy about coffee there.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to kind of tune into that relationship. I also know some people, and who knows how much it affects them overall, but for the most part, it seems like they drink coffee until, the early afternoon, still able to get to sleep, still able to feel fine. If they don't drink it, they still feel fine. Like, there are some people who and they're not very many, right? Most of the people I know are on this cycle of like trying to get to the next dose of caffeine to keep going. But there are some people who it doesn't seem to impact as negatively or get them as locked into a cycle, right? And I see them drinking it and all the time, and then I think like, oh, if they don't have it, they're going to really crash, and then they're fine. So I think how it affects you and your relationship with it is really important. But if you're in this cycle, which is super common, of just getting more caffeine to get through the fatigue and then not being able to sleep, that's one that really needs to be broken. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is useful, I generally drink like a cup of coffee in the morning. But every once in a while, every couple months, I take a week or 2 or 3 off just to see how it's impacting me. Because what I don't want is, like you were saying, these really heavy withdrawals, this really heavy feeling of reliance. Not because it's totally ruining my life. It's not that hard to get coffee.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that serious. But on the flip side, like, I don't want to start developing a relationship like that with anything. Because if it ever comes to, for whatever reason, I don't have access to the thing, I don't want my mood, my state, my well-being to be dependent on my ability to get that. And going back to like fatigue and energy, I don't want my energy to be dependent on my access to coffee. It doesn't set up a good relationship with the substance, and I'm sure there are effects on your body that I'm not fully aware of, but by just continually pumping it in there, that isn't especially beneficial. But again, like, a cup, maybe two in the morning, way before sleep time, has been okay for me. I think that's probably okay for most people. And then anything outside of that, you have to really be careful and pay attention to the relationship you have with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I'm not saying, everyone needs to quit coffee right now. It's like, that's not what I'm saying at all, but it's just like to know how that relationship is. And, one of the things I do with my patients is I have them take out everything, including caffeine, just so they know how it affects their body. Do they go through those intense withdrawal? If they do, then they're clearly dependent on that system. And it actually can improve energy and time. Yeah, you go through like this crappy week or two of withdrawal, but then actually energy improves because it's like naturally produced in that sense. So yeah, some people can get away, and it's really a question of, again, I don't tell people like, you can never eat this food, you can never drink coffee again. That's not what I do. It's more of like, this is a little science experiment on yourself to see how does food and caffeine affect your body, because you don't really currently know, because you've been drinking coffee every single day for the last 20 years. So let's just see. I know it's going to be hard. We'll see. Just like, and if they're like resistant, then they're like, there's clearly, some reliance on the substance to get through their day. And it's really, if they're you get to decide, is it worth it for me? Like, for some people, like, I do a lot of food sensitivities, and if they, for me, like, I get a slight sensitivity to snap peas and avocado for some random reason. Sometimes, occasionally, not all the time, my lip will swell like a little bit. I don't know why. For me, it's worth it, because I like it's like, it'll go away after a while. But for other people, if they have dairy or something like that, and they have massive exploding diarrhea or something, and I'm like, yeah, maybe that's not worth it. But you get to determine that, not me. You get to determine, is it worth it or not? So if caffeine is causing you like headaches, like jitteriness, you can't sleep, you have digestive issues, if it's causing like a bunch of issues for you, then you got to decide, is it worth it for me to continue doing this? And if you're not willing to experiment and try, then you're clearly dependent, and you will never know if, like, hey, maybe my sleep might improve if I cut it out. I don't know until you try.
Yeah, and that goes along perfectly, I think, with kind of my journey with it, because there was a point, and I think this is actually pretty common too, but there was a point where I was drinking a lot of caffeine, and not only, like, it wasn't giving me any energy. It was just making me not able to sleep. I was still exhausted and just barely awake. I don't know a good way to describe it, but I mean, it was just this like, okay, I can't sleep now. Still exhausted. It's not doing anything for me. And when I got to that point, I realized I wanted to reevaluate that relationship. And it was only through completely weaning off of it. And maybe this is something to highlight on. When I was at that point of drinking a ton of caffeine every day, I didn't want to go cold turkey, not because I didn't want to stop drinking it, but just because I knew that the withdrawal would be dramatic. So that's one other point to make here, I guess, is if you do want to go down, you can start by just paying attention to how much you're having. I think I was around like 6 cups, which isn't the most I've heard, but it's still pretty high. Anyway, I started paying attention to my intake, and then just like slowly every week knocking that down, and then doing things like switching to half decaf, half calf, things like that to kind of work my way down. Anyway, it was only through that process that I kind of realized what balance actually works for me, what places caffeine actually is nice and useful for me, or when, coffee is appropriate for me or helpful for me, and when it's not. So it's through that process that I found that, up until noon probably is all right. And 1 to 3 cups, anything more than that, I start getting some stuff I don't like. Any later than that, it starts messing with my sleep schedule.
Mhm.
But I think it's really important to know that, because I wouldn't have known, and I would have stayed on this higher than I'm comfortable with amount every single day, and probably just kept increasing and kept increasing, or stayed at 6 to 8 cups, which is just a lot. It's just like a lot of liquid to ingest that's just coffee.
Right.
So I think that's one of the valuable things about tapering off and going down to 0 for a period of time, is you get to see, okay, what is it that I actually enjoyed, and what is it that I'm doing just because I was doing it? That extra 3 to 5 cups at the second half of the day, I was just doing out of habit, and it wasn't adding anything, and it was subtracting a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to pay attention to the quantity that you're consuming, absolutely, and to pay attention to the timing to figure out what that timing works best for you. Because for me, I mean, I don't even drink caffeinated coffee rarely these days anymore. But yeah, even when I did, I was just like, yeah, I have a hard stop after 12. It's like, no, because I know that's gonna mess up my sleep and that's not worth it. And yeah, limiting it to like 1 or 2 cups, I think, at the most. But I was also not drinking it every day consistently. So I think that was another thing to be like, oh, am I doing it every day? Which I think is why I can stop at 1 or 2, like, and be fine. But yeah, I think it's just really being mindful of your habits and your consumption to really pay attention to that. Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts about ways to boost up your energy, as far as, if people are pretty good with their habits? Do you have any other tips or ideas?
Let's see. I guess at a generic level, right?
Mm-hmm.
The main way I've found to boost energy is to find something that you enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's only for a couple minutes, and inject that into your day. Something that genuinely lights you up,
Yeah.
even if that's not the activity you need to do or the one that's going to happen next.
Right.
Just finding a little bit of space to get that in there, because I think adding that actual enjoyment can boost you and break you out of a fatigue state where you're like, okay, I have to file my taxes today, and I have to go to the DMV, and I have to run this meeting, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And it's just, this just endless list of things that maybe aren't the most fun or entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Getting something in there that you really enjoy can break you out of it a little bit and give you a little more life to get through the day until you can find a time to recover from some of the fatigue you built up.
Yeah, no, that's such a important point, is of finding activities that enliven you, kind of give you life, or things that get you excited. I think that's really important, because I mean, we all have to do like mundane tasks, and we have to go grocery shopping and fill up our gas tanks and things like that. But it's just like, those aren't the most exciting things. But if it's like back to back of all these various things, so just like inject something that brings you joy. And for me, actually, this is a prime example. I'm a living example of, like, I was super tired before we started recording, but I enjoy doing HappyTalks episodes. I was actually like, man, maybe we should like reschedule, because I was so tired. But now that I'm in it, I enjoy it. I actually remember that I get enlivened from sharing and talking and chatting with you, Donovan. So that shifted my energy. So now I'm like, okay, I think I can get through the day without taking a nap. So I feel better, excited about my presentation later today. So
Yeah, that's nice.
yeah.
I also would say too, I think it's important to have in your back pocket a couple, 2, 3, 4 things that you can do that may not take 45 minutes, right? Like sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have that much time to run things out. But I'm glad that,
Yeah.
this has been helpful. But also, like we were talking about before, a tiny bit of exercise, a little bit of music, just these little things. If you can find the things that you really enjoy, even if it is just a short conversation with someone, like 4 or 5 minute quick call to somebody, that can help like improve your mood. Those can really come in handy for the days where things are dragging a bit.
Mhm. Yeah, no, actually, that kind of it's interconnected, like mood, energy definitely can play a role and feed into each other. But I was just thinking, well, like a week or two ago, I was kind of feeling down. And, when I was feeling down, I feel like fatigued and tired. I actually ended up watching, like, think of things that bring you joy and happiness, even if it's like there's this literally less than 1 minute video of my nephew who's almost 4. He's actually going to turn 4 in a couple weeks. But the video was taught at the beginning of the pandemic. He's learning how to potty train, and he sings this like song of like pee 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 in the potty. It's like, it is so adorable and cute, and he's just like shining bright because he peed in his potty and he got a sticker. Then he starts singing about how he's got the sticker, and it's like the cutest thing. I could watch it like a million times. I probably have at least 100 by now. but it's just like something like cute and quick like that I know will light me up and get me through like a dreary day. that can help. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think it's easy to forget about those things. Like, I don't know how to make them more present in our minds. I know for me, I probably need to think about that a little bit more, because sometimes I just go through the day when I'm feeling lower and don't look at those options.
Right.
But it really doesn't take much time. And there are really a lot of things that I actually enjoy. So
Right.
maybe I need that video. Maybe that's the secret that I've been missing.
Like when you feel down, you cannot not smile when you see this video. So
Well, I think for me, that's pretty much all I've got to say on the topic.
yeah, so I think we covered this topic pretty well. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.